Welcome to Inside the Minds of the Greatest Criminals. Today, we delve into one of the most fascinating and enigmatic criminal cases of recent decades. A man, a seemingly perfect family, a methodical massacre, and a disappearance. On April 21st, 2011, the police made a grim discovery in a luxurious house in Nantes. Under the terrace, 5 bodies carefully buried. Agnès, Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoît Dupont de Ligonnès, all executed in cold blood. Only one family member is missing, Xavier, the father. He quickly becomes the prime suspect. But he vanishes into thin air. What really happened in this house? Why would a seemingly respectable man methodically murder his own family? And above all, where is he today, dead or alive? Is Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès the elusive criminal we believe him to be, or a victim of an even more diabolical plot? Welcome to the troubled mind of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès.
My name is Xavier Dupont from Ligonnès. If you are listening to this, it's because you want to understand how a man can reach this point, how a father can suddenly erase everything he has built. But tell me, what do you really know about me? I have been described as a loving father, a charismatic man, cultured, from a respectable family, but also as a manipulator, a compulsive liar, a man broken by his failures. I have been all of that to varying degrees. My life has never been what you imagine. I was born in Versailles, a bourgeois city, a privileged setting, a family with noble names. Impressive, isn't it? Dupont de Ligonnès, a name with a title that hides many cracks. My father, Hubert, was an adventurer, a free man, a playboy, free enough to abandon his wife and child to start a new life elsewhere. I was still a kid when he left. I grew up surrounded by women, my mother, Geneviève, and my sisters. They taught me everything: faith, discipline, and the weight of destiny. Geneviève was not a woman like the others. She was convinced she was chosen, a messenger of God. She had founded a prayer group, Philadelphia, where she spoke of the apocalypse, the end of the world, the invisible enemy that was watching us. In our home, everything was mystical, sacred. I grew up with the idea that I had a mission, something greater to accomplish. But very quickly I understood that in this world, only money ruled. Money? My whole life revolved around this obsession. Earning, spending, lacking, starting over. I never wanted a mundane destiny. I had ideas, ambition, and entrepreneurial spirit. In the United States, I had discovered a world where everything seemed possible. There, I wanted to settle, succeed, become someone. But in France, it was something else. Failures again and again. I created companies, launched projects, the sales route, a directory for VIP, hotel guides, private clubs. But nothing ever really worked. Too big, too fast, without the means. And then there were always the debts. So I borrowed from my friends, my relatives, my mistresses, from Emmanuel, my loyal friend, who always supported me, from Catherine, my childhood love, who lent me 50,000 euros. I promised them repayments, future profits. But deep down I knew I was lying. Agnès, she eventually understood, my wife, the mother of my children. She was no longer blind. She saw me for what I was, an utter failure, a fraud. She would tell me sometimes with anger, sometimes with that silent contempt that drove me mad. She had had enough, and then there was the money, the inheritance from her family. 300,000 euros one day, there was nothing left. When Agnès realized that the money was gone, everything changed. She was no longer the subdued woman who accepted everything in silence. She was cold, distant, contemptuous. She looked at me like a failure, a good-for-nothing. I knew what she thought, that I had ruined our family, that I was incapable of getting us out of the abyss, and it wasn't untrue. The debts were piling up, the creditors were becoming more insistent. Soon, everything would collapse. I no longer had control. Agnès was talking about separation. She humiliated me, rejected me. But worse still, she talked about the future, a future without me and my children. What would they think of their father? The brilliant father they had admired. It was just a lie, a facade that was crumbling. Soon he would know. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't lose everything, so I did what I knew how to do best. I planned everything. Everything had to be perfect. There was no room for improvisation. I started by training myself. A well-prepared man leaves nothing to chance. I joined a shooting club. At first it was innocent, just a hobby. But very quickly it became something else. I learned to handle a weapon, to aim accurately, to shoot without trembling. I already had a rifle inherited from my father, an old .22 long rifle, almost a toy, but with a silencer. It did the job perfectly. Then I bought what was needed: ammunition, quicklime, bags of cement. I knew no one would be suspicious. Who could have imagined? Then I wrote the letters. Words carefully chosen to dispel suspicion. A hasty departure, a sudden transfer, a secret mission for the American government. Absurd stories, but crafted well enough to sow doubt. There was only one step left. I waited for the right moment. On April 3rd, 2011, everything was ready. I started with Agnès. It was easier that way. She was sleeping deeply, unaware of what was about to happen. One shot. Just one, right there in the head. No struggle, no scream. It was clean. Arthur next, then Benoit, Anne, Thomas. They were all sleeping. I was methodical, precise. One bullet to make sure, a second to be certain. I worked in silence, in the darkness. I felt nothing. No fear, no sadness, just necessity. It was the only possible way out. The next day I started digging. The ground was hard. Each shovel strike reminded me of the irreversibility of my act. I dug under the terrace, right where no one would think to look. One by one I carried the bodies. They were heavy, but I had planned everything. Sheets, plastic bags, quicklime to slow down decomposition. I took my time, I did things neatly. I arranged everything carefully. Each had its place. I added a few items, rosaries, mementos. A final tribute to my family. Then I covered the pit. I packed the soil, replaced the slabs, put the dog's bowl back in its place, as if nothing had happened. At that moment, I knew I had succeeded. No one would suspect a thing. I was no longer a man cornered by debts, no longer a failure despised by his wife, no longer an unworthy father. I was free, finally. Almost. I had one last thing to do: disappear. I sent the letters, the ones I had carefully written. To the family, friends, the children's schools, Agnès' employers. The story was simple. We were leaving. A transfer. A secret mission. A sudden departure towards a better life. Elsewhere, I emptied the house, erased the traces, deleted the memories. Then I hit the road. I left like a man on vacation, calm, relaxed. I slept in hotels, dined in restaurants, left clues, bills, surveillance images. I was visible, too visible. They thought they were following my trail, but in reality, I was guiding them. In April, I reached Roquebrune-sur-Argent. I left my car, walked for a while, then I disappeared. That's what everyone believes. They searched for me everywhere for days, weeks, years. I was the most hunted man in France. They searched the forests, the monasteries, the hotels, the ports, the borders. They followed hundreds of false leads, received thousands of reports, but they never found a body because there wasn't one. He wanted a suicide, a logical end, a conclusion, but the truth is, I was always one step ahead. I left, or that you'll never know. What matters is that I am free, and I will remain so.
And after Roquebrune-sur-Argent, nothing more. No more trace, no more certainty. To try to understand the psychology of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, we put ourselves in the shoes of an amateur psychologist specializing in criminology and behavioral psychology. Today, it is our guest Etienne who will play this role. Etienne, in your opinion, what is the psychological profile of this man?
Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès is a fascinating case. What immediately strikes is his sense of superiority and a certain arrogance. He sees himself as an intelligent, visionary man, above others. He says it himself in his writings. He considers himself part of an elite, a strategist, a man in control. But behind this facade hides a deep insecurity. His professional failures, his lies, his debts, all prove that he did not have the control he claimed to have. He lived in an illusion, a fiction he maintained until reality caught up with him. But what could have driven him to such an act? It must be understood that for him, this failure was not only financial, it was existential. The humiliation was unbearable. He experienced the loss of his status as a social death. He could not bear for his image to crack, for his lie to collapse. From then on, he adopted a radical logic. Rather than losing his family, he chose to destroy it. We are dealing here with an extreme form of extended suicide. He doesn't just erase himself, he erases everything that symbolized his existence along with him. It's a perverse mechanism, but coherent in his mind. If I fall, everything falls with me.
So, he would have premeditated everything.
Yes, and with chilling precision. What distinguishes this case from a crime of passion is the meticulous planning. The purchase of ammunition, shooting practice, letters written in advance, the staging of the departure. He anticipated everything, and this is where we touch on the duality of this man. He's both methodical and delusional. He planned everything, except for one thing, that the bodies would be discovered.
But then, how do you explain that he could disappear without leaving a trace?
That's the big question. Either he committed suicide after his crime, which is a possibility, but his body hasn't been found, so this hypothesis remains uncertain. Or he managed to disappear, which, given his intelligence and network, cannot be ruled out. He knew the United States well, and he was fascinated by the idea of a new life elsewhere. He also had contacts in closed religious communities. The idea that he might have taken refuge in a monastery or abroad under a new identity is credible. But the truth is, after 14 years, we still don't know if he is dead or alive. And perhaps that's what makes this case so fascinating. A perfect crime, a disappearance without answers, and a man whose mystery continues to grow.
Thank you, Etienne. The Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès once wrote, "No one will be able to find me." 14 years later, it seems that this promise has been kept. Did he commit suicide in the Moor Massif? Did he find refuge in a monastery protected by a religious community? Or has he simply started a new life elsewhere under a new identity? Since 2011, investigators have been relentlessly pursuing him. Hundreds of reports, false leads, a failed arrest in 2019, but still no proof of his death. So, is he still out there somewhere, listening to those who tell his story? Or was his plan so perfect that he managed to disappear forever? It's up to you to decide. If this episode captivated you, subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming cases. Share this episode, leave us your opinions and theories. And above all, never believe that someone has completely disappeared.